Welcome back. So second video of putting the big block back together. So what I'm doing now is it's called degreeing the camshaft. So I have a dial indicator set up right on the center of the piston. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you want to try and make it square this way and that way. And you're basically turning the engine over to find exactly where top dead center is. And then once you do that, you basically put the degree wheel back to 0. And then you put a lifter in and you go to maximum lift, and on the intake side and on the exhaust side. And then that, how I understand it is it basically sets, you look at the cam specs and you want to find where the center line of the camshaft, which would be at maximum lift, is in relation to the crankshaft. So basically there's a degree spec. It's like for this cam, I have a straw roller cam. I believe the cam spec, if I remember correctly, it's 105 and 113. So I've already went through, everything looks right, but I'll show you kind of how to do this. And then you can kind of do it on your own. So what people recommend is basically you take this, you set it to 0 when you think it's at top dead center, and then go plus 50 thousandths one way, plus 50 thousandths the other way, and take your degree reading, divide it in 2, and then that will give you where you should move the degree wheel to for 0 degrees. So after I did that, you can basically see on here, if I move this back to top dead center on this dial indicator. So top dead center is about right there, and you can see on the degree wheel, with these smaller degree wheels are a little harder, but it's around 0. So that kind of sets your your origin, you could say. And then I'll basically cut to a video right now where I show you how to do the first one, which will be the exhaust side. So you can see this little setup I have. So basically I just bought a push rod that they had at O'Reilly's. Doesn't really matter the length, because you're just going to set up the dial indicator, so it kind of mimics how the push rod's going to move on the lifter. So then what you do is you spin the engine over until basically this is going to be the exhaust, is at maximum lift. So you'll see it, similar to what you did with the piston. It'll come up and then you'll see it kind of crest and then start to go back down on the dial indicator. And then you try and find the top of the hill there and then set it to 0. And then what you're going to do is check it. Basically you always want to spin it clockwise in relation to the front of the engine, because that's the way it spins, and that's the way this is going to be basically locked together when it's spinning. You can imagine if it goes back, there's a little bit of play in there. So you basically go forward, and then it goes I think downward, and then write down what it is at 050, and then you turn it back so it's basically on the opposite side of the center line of the cam, and then go back 20 degrees or 20 thousandths before the 050 that you're going to get, so the cam is, or so the chain is nice and tight, and then go forward until it's at 50 and record both those numbers. And then when you divide it by 2, that'll give you the center line of the cam, and then you'll see in the cam specs basically what the lobe center line is for the intake and exhaust side. And then switch it up and do the other side for the exhaust and follow the same procedure. And I got, as I said, it's like maybe 1 degree within what it's supposed to be. And that could really, it's a pretty small degree wheel. I think 1 degree is pretty much fine. I think basically if it was off, quite a few degrees, they make these sprockets like I have down here that you can take off and retard or advance in 2 degree increments. So I'm looking good. I can keep proceeding on. We know the cam is going to be in the right place, so I am good to go. So one thing you have to check if you're changing one of these Mark IV blocks over to a roller cam is how much movement you have back and forth from the front or in the camshaft. So you don't want it moving back and forth, and that's why you kind of have a cam button in here, just basically kind of a bearing that pushes up against the timing cover here. So I have basically just a stock big block timing cover. It's a GM one. So they also have a bearing on the back of the cam sprocket. So that, you know, makes it so you can't go back this way, and then the button on the front makes it so you can't go far this way. And the tolerance, Chris Straub recommends, who's kind of the manufacturer of the camshaft here, he recommends 7 thousandths to 10 thousandths. So I kind of put the dial indicator in here and wedged it back and forth. I already did the measurement, and it's right, you know, within the ballpark. So I should be good to go. And now I'm going to take this back off, put silicone all around it to fill any gaps in the, you know, in the gasket or whatnot, and then also put the seal on here and torque down all the bolts and everything for the cam sprocket, and then I can be done basically with this front part of the engine. I might put the balancer on as well, but you know, keep pushing forward. I do want to get the heads on in this video and start measuring for the custom push rods. So I got a few things to do, and we'll catch up here in a few minutes. All right, so obviously got this cover on, got a seal in here, and you know, used some silicone around here and cleaned it up once I had it all set. And now I'm putting on basically the oil pan now. I got some nice ARP bolts to secure it all down. And you know, I think people online, it's kind of, some people say you don't need any sealant, but I feel like a little bit of sealant here, you know, in between these seams and also kind of down in the corners. You can't really go wrong, in my opinion, just to make sure you have a good seal, especially in these corners. Up here, you're probably okay without it. Same with the, you know, radius back here. So got it on there. Definitely a good call, in my opinion, to put some silicone in the corners. And I got a nice set of ARP bolts. Obviously, I think ARP is kind of the gold standard on fasteners. Definitely recommend them. So this guy's on there. I'm going to flip this back over. And I'm not going to put the dampener on for a little while so I can keep turning this over. I still need to measure for those push rods. So next step is probably going to be to put the cylinder heads on. So I got those AFR heads over there. I'm going to flip this guy back over and also put in my head studs. Obviously that comes first, and then put the heads on. So pretty exciting. You know, we're making progress. As you can see, I opted to put head studs on here instead of reusing the bolts. So I think the bolts that I had for the E-Streets would have worked, but you know, I'd like to make some upgrades while I'm in here, and these kind of give you a better clamping force, similar to what's going on with the main caps. So I just screwed these in here, you know, lightly to make sure when I put the head on that none of them are, you know, misaligned, and it slid right on there. So I'm going to take them back out and use this Permatex #2 on the threads, clean them off really well. They have some sort of oil on them or something, and then put this on the threads, put them all in there, put the head gasket on, and then obviously put the head on, and moly lube under the threads on the head bolts, or on the head studs, the nuts for them, and the washers, to make sure you get that right, the correct clamping, or the correct torque. And then there is a sequence that you torque them down on the head. So not as critical on the main caps, but for the head, there's a sequence that you follow. And I'm not going to get a time lapse of this side, but I will get a time lapse of the other side. So I'm going to pause the video just for a second here and cover, you know, something that is really important to do before you finalize, you know, the bottom end and putting in the, putting on the timing cover and putting on the oil pan. So I basically made the mistake of not checking the piston to valve clearance before I put, you know, the camshaft in and finalized everything from the bottom end's perspective. And you'll see I, you know, go through and check the push rod length and get, you know, the custom push rod length that I needed. But once I did check the piston to valve clearance, it came out radially too close. So, you know, stop yourself, and basically, while everything's easy to take apart still, in terms of the bottom end, maybe just do one piston and check piston to valve clearance. So then if you do need to take it all apart and make some cuts to the pistons, or go back to the drawing board, you can do that instead of having to take it all back apart. So as you can see, I got this set up. So I got my adjustable push rod here, I got my guide plate and rocker studs, and what I've been doing is putting some basically like machinist die right on the tip of the valve stem. This is the exhaust, and using my rocker arm, putting that on there and then tightening it so it's zero lash, and then turning the engine over. And I've been playing with the length, and this is pretty much perfect. It's right in the center of the valve. Definitely been a lot of guessing checking, but you can see how the pattern, basically the sweep, is centered on there. So if it was too far this way, it would basically push on the valve stem and it wouldn't be straight going up and down, so it would start pushing it and wearing out the valve guides. So now I'm going to jump over and do this one. I have all these adjustable length push rods. I don't really like the one from Comp Cams. I think I would probably have better luck building my own, but we have them. I have to tape them so they don't kind of spin, but I got this one all to length, so I'll tell Straub, I got them making the push rods for me, the length, and I just got to do the intake, so then I have both. So you can see this was my first shot at the intake side, so too far inward this way, so I'm going to extend the push rod length and it'll push that outward. So right now I have some clay on cylinder 1. This is kind of the cylinder I've been working with, and I'm going to put my adjustable push rods in here, put the head back on, and check my piston to valve clearance. So you basically just put a little clay on the piston and then put some oil on the valves so they don't actually stick to the clay, and then put it all back together, get everything set up, turn it over a few times, and then I'll measure the thickness of the clay where it gets pressed on from the valve, and that'll give me my piston to valve clearance. I don't have too radical of compression or anything, but you definitely do want to check this if you're making the changes that I am. So I got a little bad news. So I put the timing cover and oil pan on here before I checked the piston to valve clearance. So do not recommend that, because I did get my push rod length and everything figured out, and then when I checked the piston to valve clearance, it's really close on this side. When I actually put this in here, I just kind of put it back in here after measuring it, but it basically touches, and I think it's because these pistons are made for 2.19 inch valves, and the valves that I have in these AFR heads are 2 1/4. So 2 1/4 I think would come more up to here, and you could see the radius would come more to fit what's in the actual bore. So what I'm going to do is unfortunately take it back apart. Oil pan has to come off, timing cover has to come off, and I'm going to retard the cam 2 degrees, and that should give me some more clearance. But push comes to shove, if I still need more, I'll probably grind the piston just in this area, because it basically shrinks as it goes this way, the clearance. So I could just grind all the pistons right there. A lot of meat in that area, wouldn't really affect anything, maybe just lose a little bit of compression. I went in here with the Dremel, and I didn't feel like that was the best way to do it, and I basically posted online, and this person named Dave, he makes these fly cutters. The company is Lindy Tools, so you basically put these in the head, and then it'll go in here and make basically the perfect clearance 060 around this relief. So this is the way I'm going to do it. I'll go basically to the bottom of the valve relief, and then I should be set. So I'm going to set the distance basically using the valve with no spring on it, push it down till it touches the top of the piston here. I have this dial indicator on here to find top dead center, and once I figure that out, then I'll be able to basically subtract from here and set the stop at the right location. And I'm definitely for this first one going to be taking the head off and checking and making sure the cut is going into the right area. I'm a little concerned that it might end up touching the bore, so definitely got to keep an eye on that. It shouldn't, but you never know. So we'll have to do this on all 8 pistons, and then I'll probably take them out actually and radius the corner on them, because I think it's going to make a real sharp point, which you don't want, because heat will basically concentrate there and you can get detonations. So you can see with this cut that I made, it basically increased this area a lot more, which is the radial distance. So the the tool is 0.120 oversized in terms of radius, so that gives you 60 thousandths, or in terms of diameter, and that gives you 60 thousandths more on the radius. So you can see I got lots of clearance now, and you know, basically when that valve opens, no worries about it hitting the piston, which is what we want. So I'm going to do this on basically all the pistons, and then I'm going to pull them out one by one, and radius basically right there where the sharp edge is. Make sure it's nice and smooth where the cut is, and there's also kind of a you know, chamfer down in here, so it's nice and smooth. So it looks really nice. I'll try and make them all consistent so it's still good and balanced, and then clean it all up, put it back together, and then I can finally put these heads on here for good. So you can see I got all of these cut, tried to make them as close to the same as possible. They're not perfect, but I think the geometry of the piston is a little different, but the depth of the cut is basically all the same. So I'll be taking these out and taking the Dremel to each of them to get rid of these, you know, real sharp areas where detonation would most likely occur. But I'm going to put you on the time lapse for this bank of cylinders, and you can watch me put the head on and off and switch the cutter around. So now that I got them all cut, I'm going around and checking all the piston to valve clearance just to double check. You know, most likely it would be right, but you know, I just want to make sure. And one thing with the fly cutting tool, you want to make sure, you know, you might have to start kind of midway down because it's, you know, basically like a interference fit, and you want to make sure to go out as well, because what I noticed is I went through them and then I put this on here and I noticed that it was still tight up high. So if you pull it upward, then you're cutting it all the way through the valve relief. So something I figured out, and almost done. You know, measuring the piston to valve clearance on all the pistons, and then I'll pull the pistons out and clean them up, you know, get the sharp edges completely gone, and then put them back in, and then conclude this video. With the help of the Dremel, I basically got this sharp edge out of here. This one's ready to go back in. It's number one. Use some sandpaper as well, you know, got it real cleaned up. Put the rings back on and clean the piston, and you know, basically kind of have to redo the bottom end, make sure I put you know, the lube on these and put it all in there and make sure not to nick the crank, all that stuff. So I'm going to go through and get all these done. Can see I had a real sharp area here. Basically hit it with the Dremel, cleaned it up, and got all the burrs out of there. Basically looks like brand new. So ready to go in there, just these two pistons, and then I'm gonna call it a video. For those of you that made it to the end, I really appreciate it. Unfortunately, I lost a bunch of footage of putting the heads on and everything. The car is now running, so stay tuned for another video. I'm gonna put something together soon that's super cool, like a montage of kind of the work I've done and haven't recorded or haven't got the chance to put out. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you later. Hey, thanks for stopping in at the Phantom Motorsports YouTube channel. If you like what you saw, give me a big thumbs up, and hopefully you're leaving with a bigger smile than you came in with.